It began with something so simple, so ordinary, that most people might have brushed it aside if it hadn't been captured on camera. Donald Trump, seated in a private setting, watching an old clip of Barack Obama delivering one of his signature speeches, suddenly let out a laugh. It wasn't a polite chuckle, nor was it the kind of laugh shared among friends over a harmless joke. It was sharp, mocking, and heavy with meaning. Those in the room shifted slightly, recognizing the familiar edge in Trump's amusement. The kind that always hinted he was preparing to turn even the smallest detail into something larger than life. When the clip surfaced online, the laugh became more than just a fleeting moment. It became a spark. The footage spread quickly across television and social media. Some outlets looped it endlessly, as if trying to decode whether it was just a passing laugh or a deliberate signal. Trump's face, caught mid-smirk, radiated a certain satisfaction, as though the moment carried more weight than it appeared. To the millions who saw it, the laughter wasn't just about an old video of Obama, it was about Trump himself, his unrelenting rivalry, and his refusal to let even a single opportunity for ridicule pass by. His supporters saw it as a victory, another show of dominance, while critics bristled at the disrespect, asking why he couldn't let go of the past. But what made the laugh so significant wasn't the sound itself, it's the history attached to it. For years, Trump and Obama had been bound in a strange, almost theatrical rivalry. It dated back to the infamous White House Correspondents' Dinner, where Obama had publicly poked fun at Trump in front of Washington's elite, sparking what many believed became a personal vendetta. Since then, every exchange between them, whether direct or indirect, carried undertones of unfinished business. So when Trump laughed at Obama's speech, it wasn't merely a reaction, it was the resurfacing of that long-standing tension, one that the nation remembered vividly. People began interpreting the laugh in different ways. Some analysts insisted it was just Trump being Trump, quick to belittle anyone he saw as a rival, and that it was no more than theater. Others argued it was intentional, a calculated moment meant to remind the world of their rivalry and reignite discussions about Obama's presidency. In an age where a single tweet could send markets into chaos, a laugh on camera was enough to dominate headlines for days. It became the laugh heard around America, debated endlessly on talk shows, podcasts, and in living rooms. Trump himself, never one to back down from attention, leaned into the moment. Rather than brushing it off, he allowed the coverage to snowball, giving knowing smiles when reporters asked about it, and never denying its significance. To him, the laugh wasn't just a reaction, it was a weapon, a subtle strike delivered with no words at all. He understood that in politics, sometimes silence or, in this case, laughter spoke louder than speeches. It was his way of asserting control, of showing that Obama still lived rent-free in his mind, but not as a threat, rather as a source of amusement. For many Americans. However, the image was unsettling. Here was a former president laughing at another former president, not in camaraderie or good humor, but with a sting that cut deep into the nation's political memory. It reopened wounds from years of division, reminding people of the animosity that had fueled so much of the country's recent history. The laughter wasn't just personal, it was political. It symbolized the ongoing clash between two visions of America, embodied in two men whose paths had been intertwined far longer than most cared to admit. As the story spread, it grew legs of its own. Supporters circulated memes, celebrating Trump's mockery, while opponents decried the pettiness and lack of respect. But beneath all the noise, the truth was clear. This was no ordinary laugh. It was a moment loaded with history, rivalry, and symbolism. Trump had once again managed to capture the nation's attention with something as small as a smirk, and in doing so, reminded America that in the ongoing saga between him and Obama, nothing was ever truly finished. Would you like me to now expand Keynote 2 in the same style and length? The day after the laughter clip surfaced, Donald Trump made sure the story didn't fade into the usual media cycle. While most politicians might have ignored the buzz or laughed it off, he saw an opportunity to turn it into something much bigger. In a televised statement, standing in front of a familiar backdrop of American flags, he leaned forward, his voice carrying that trademark mix of bravado and certainty. He didn't just laugh at Barack Obama, he called him out directly. The nation watched as Trump declared that Obama's legacy was overhyped and built on false promises. Words sharp enough to cut through the noise of ordinary politics. What started as a laugh had now transformed into a bold public challenge. The words landed with force. Because they weren't vague, they were personal. Trump wasn't merely criticizing policy, he was targeting Obama himself, placing him back into the spotlight as if the rivalry had never cooled. He reminded viewers of the healthcare law, the international deals, the speeches that once defined Obama's presidency, dismissing them as weak or ineffective. He said them not as a man reflecting on the past, but as someone determined to rewrite. It was an escalation no one had anticipated, and it electrified the conversation across America. The reaction was immediate. Supporters cheered, calling it another example of Trump's courage to say what others wouldn't. They flooded social media with clips of his statement, praising him for telling it like it is. On the other side, critics bristled, accusing him of disrespect and obsession, questioning why a former president felt the need to tear down another long after leaving office. Talk show panels debated the meaning behind his challenge. Was it an act of insecurity? Or was it a calculated strategy to remind America that he remained a fighter, unwilling to let the shadow of Obama dominate him? Barack Obama himself stayed silent, a silence that carried its own weight. People waited for his response, recalling the calm, measured tone he often used in the face of Trump's provocations. His restraint only added to the drama, allowing speculation to swirl unchecked. Some saw his silence as dignified, a refusal to be dragged into the spectacle, while others worried it allowed Trump to control the narrative. The absence of Obama's voice made Trump's challenge feel even louder, as if the stage had been cleared for him to speak freely. The boldness of Trump's move wasn't just in what he said, but in how he said it. There was no hesitation, no softening of words. He stood with confidence, portraying himself not as a man reacting to a clip, but as a leader seizing the chance to dismantle what he saw as false glory. He painted Obama as a figure whose achievements were nothing more than smoke and mirrors, a narrative designed to resonate with his base and unsettle his opponents. In politics, perception is power, and Trump had once again shaped perception with a few carefully chosen lines. For the American public. The moment became more than a political statement. It felt like a revival of an old rivalry that had defined much of the last decade. The flashbacks to the White House Correspondents' Dinner, the jabs exchanged over policies, and the campaign trail insults all came rushing back. Trump wasn't just talking about Obama, he was reigniting the fire that had fueled his rise in the first place. By challenging Obama's legacy, he was reminding America of the unfinished battle between two drastically different visions of leadership. As the days went on, the statement continued to dominate headlines. Analysts broke down his words frame by frame, dissecting the intent and the timing. Was he laying the groundwork for another campaign move? Was he trying to cement himself as the anti-Obama figure in history books? Theories abounded, but one thing was undeniable. He had taken a laugh and transformed it into a declaration that could not be ignored. His willingness to publicly diminish Obama's legacy wasn't just about settling old scores. It was about drawing a line in the sand, a line that forced America to choose sides once again. Would you like me to continue by expanding? Keynote 3 in 700 words, with the same style. The response to Donald Trump's public challenge didn't come from Barack Obama himself, but from the millions of Americans who had witnessed the moment. The nation erupted almost instantly, with television networks scrambling to cover the fallout and social media spiraling into chaos. What had started as a laugh, followed by sharp words, now turned into a national debate that touched every corner of the country. Trump's decision to directly question Obama's legacy wasn't just a political statement. It was gasoline poured onto a fire that had been smoldering for years. On one side, Trump's supporters celebrated. They saw his words as proof that he was still fearless, still willing to confront what they believed was an exaggerated narrative about Obama's presidency. They pointed to policies like healthcare reform or foreign agreements, echoing Trump's argument that these had been failures disguised as achievements. Rallies across the nation buzzed with chants, with crowds repeating Trump's lines as though they had been waiting for this moment of open defiance. For them, his laughter and his bold declaration weren't petty, they were powerful. A reminder that he hadn't forgotten the grievances that had fueled his rise in the first place. On the other side, critics were stunned and outraged. They viewed Trump's actions as yet another attempt to undermine respect for institutions and diminish a leader who still held a special place in American history. For many, Obama was more than a politician. He was a symbol of dignity, progress, and change. To hear Trump laugh at him and then tear into his legacy felt like an insult to the millions who had supported Obama's vision for the country. Commentators across major networks condemned the move, describing it as divisive, unnecessary, and even dangerous at a time when unity felt desperately needed. The media played its part in amplifying the clash. Cable news stations ran endless loops of Trump's smirk, his mocking tone, and his bold challenge, analyzing every detail. Late-night hosts used the moment as material, turning the laugh into sketches and punchlines. But beneath the humor was an undeniable truth. The tension between these two former presidents had once again seized the national stage. Podcasts, blogs, and opinion columns spilled over with hot takes, and the question on everyone's lips was the same. Why couldn't Trump let go of Obama? In households across America, the debate was personal. Families argued at dinner tables, colleagues whispered at work, and friends sparred on social media threads. The laughter had turned into a test of allegiance. Were you with Trump and his mission to dismantle Obama's reputation, or did you stand by Obama as a figure whose contributions deserved respect? It was no longer about the clip itself. It was about the identity of America, the values it upheld, and the deep divisions that defined its people. Obama's silence only added layers to the storm. While Trump basked in the spotlight, Obama remained characteristically calm, not offering a direct response. For his supporters, this restraint was a mark of class, proof that he didn't need to engage in petty battles. For Trump's base, however, it was seen as weakness, a refusal to defend himself, and they reveled in the idea that Trump had forced him into silence. Each side interpreted the quiet differently, but both agreed on one thing: the absence of Obama's voice made Trump's words louder. As days turned into weeks, the ripple effects continued. Political analysts warned that this revived rivalry was more than entertainment, it was reshaping public opinion. Trump's boldness energized his base, while his critics grew more determined to defend Obama's record. Polls reflected the divide, showing sharp spikes in partisan support on both sides. It wasn't just a conversation anymore, it was a battlefield, and every American had been pulled into it, whether they wanted to be or not. For Trump, this was the outcome he wanted. He thrived in the storm, feeding on the attention and the polarization. By mocking Obama, he had once again forced the country to talk about him, to choose sides, to remember the rivalry that had defined much of the last decade. And while the media questioned his motives, one fact remained clear: Trump had mastered the art of turning even the smallest gesture into a spectacle. His laugh, his smirk, his words, they had reignited a cultural clash that reminded America of just how divided it truly was. Do you want me to now expand Keynote 4 in 700 words with the same storytelling flow? When Donald Trump decided to move beyond words, the nation realized his laugh at Barack Obama had only been the beginning. What seemed like a fleeting moment of mockery had evolved into a full-blown political maneuver. In one of his trademark announcements delivered with the same dramatic flair that had characterized his career, Trump revealed he was launching a sweeping initiative aimed at dismantling one of Obama's most celebrated achievements. It wasn't just talk anymore, it was action, a direct attempt to erase what his predecessor had built. The shift stunned America because it proved that the laughter hadn't been casual at all. It had been a signal of something bigger. The initiative hit the public like a shockwave. Government agencies scrambled to understand the scope of Trump's plan, while legal experts immediately began debating its implications. For many, the realization set in that this was no longer a war of words, it was a collision of legacies. Trump wasn't content to simply laugh at Obama's past speeches, or question his record on television. He wanted to redefine that record, to stamp his own authority, where Obama's name had once been written. His announcement was framed as bold and necessary, but everyone could see the shadow it carried. It was about undoing Obama, piece by piece, law by law, symbol by symbol. Supporters were ecstatic. They rallied behind Trump's decision, calling it a long overdue correction. In town halls, rallies, and online forums, they praised his determination to follow through rather than just criticize. To them, it was proof of his strength. He wasn't just pointing fingers, he was making moves. For years, they had grumbled about policies they saw as weak or misguided, and now they had a leader willing to challenge them openly. They saw Trump's announcement not only as a rejection of Obama, but also as validation of their own frustrations. But for critics, the move was far more troubling. To them it was petty and vindictive, the act of a man still haunted by the shadow of his predecessor. They argued that policies built during Obama's time in office had been hard-fought victories, and Trump's willingness to tear them down felt less like leadership and more like revenge. Protests erupted in major cities, with signs that read "Protect Obama's legacy, and this is about all of us." Commentators pointed out that even years after leaving the White House, Obama's name could still galvanize a crowd, something that Trump's laughter and subsequent actions had reignited. The most shocking part wasn't the announcement itself, but the speed with which it began to take shape. Executive orders were drafted, agencies were redirected, and debates in Congress turned fiery. The rivalry that had once seemed symbolic suddenly had tangible consequences for millions of Americans. Healthcare systems, international agreements, and community programs were all thrust back into uncertainty, their futures tied to the clash between two men who had defined an era of politics. The laughter had started as a spark, but now it was fueling a fire that touched lives in real and immediate ways. Barack Obama, as always, responded with calmness or rather with silence at first. He stayed away from the fray, watching as the nation debated. When he finally did speak, it was measured, carefully worded, avoiding Trump's name altogether. He emphasized unity, progress, and the need to build rather than destroy. But everyone understood the subtext. He was addressing Trump's actions without giving him the satisfaction of direct confrontation. The contrast between the two men was stark, one laughing and tearing down, the other quietly calling for hope and perseverance. In living rooms across America, families were divided yet again. Some applauded Trump's willingness to follow through on promises. Others saw it as an unnecessary attack on someone who had already left office. The divide wasn't just political, it was cultural, personal, and deeply emotional. Once more, Trump had managed to pull the country into a debate that reached far beyond policies. It was about identity, history, and the legacy of leadership itself. Asterisk, as weeks passed, the effects of his initiative grew clearer. Legal challenges piled up, governors voiced opposition, and international leaders expressed concern. The United States found itself caught in a tug-of-war between two presidencies, one past and one still shaping the present. And while some viewed it as politics as usual, others couldn't shake the feeling that this was something bigger, something more symbolic. Trump's laugh had transformed into action, and that action was rewriting America's political landscape in ways no one could ignore. Asterisk, do you also want me to craft the 500-word ending statement in the same storytelling flow to wrap this up? What began with a laugh had spiraled into something far larger than anyone could have predicted. Donald Trump's smirk at Barack Obama, once dismissed as another one of his antics, had set off a chain of events that gripped the nation. From that moment of mockery to the public challenge, from the uproar of reactions to the launch of a sweeping initiative, America was left wrestling with a story that was no longer about two men alone, it was about the country itself. Asterisk for many. The saga was a reminder of how fragile political legacies truly are. Obama's years in office, built on ideals of unity, progress, and hope, were suddenly being questioned, revisited, and redefined. Trump, by laughing and then acting, had proven that history was never safe from revision. Every law, every speech, every achievement could be pulled apart, reinterpreted, or even erased, depending on who held the power to do so. The rivalry between them was no longer a clash of personalities, it was a battle over memory, over how America's story would be told to future generations. Asterisk. Supporters of Trump looked at the unfolding events with satisfaction. They saw his actions as justice, a long-awaited reckoning against a leader they believed had left the country weaker. They celebrated his willingness to laugh in Obama's face, to strip away the aura of untouchability, and to challenge the narrative they had always believed was inflated. To them, Trump wasn't just mocking a man, he was mocking an entire establishment that they felt had ignored their voices for too long. His defiance became their defiance, his laughter their victory. Asterisk, but for others, the entire episode was heartbreaking. They remembered the inspiration they felt when Obama first took office, the sense of possibility and progress that defined his time in the White House. Watching Trump reduce that legacy to a punchline, and then actively work to undo it, felt personal, almost like an attack on their own hopes and memories. For them it wasn't just politics, it was a wound reopened, a reminder that in America, progress was never permanent, and dignity could be mocked in an instant. Asterisk, the truth lay somewhere in the tension between these perspectives. What shocked the nation wasn't just Trump's audacity, it was the realization that laughter could be weaponized, that something as small as a smirk could carry the weight of history. It was proof that leadership was not only about laws and policies, but about symbols, gestures, and the narratives built around them. Trump had mastered that art, turning even the simplest moments into spectacles, forcing the nation to watch, debate, and divide. Asterisk, and in the silence that followed Obama's measured responses, another truth emerged. Dignity and restraint could coexist with provocation, even when the provocation was relentless. The contrast between them was as sharp as ever, one man loud, brash, and unapologetically combative, the other calm, deliberate, and unwilling to be dragged into the mud. Together, they embodied the split vision of America, two paths pulling in opposite directions, leaving the country caught in between. Asterisk, in the end, what stunned America most was not just the laugh or the challenge, not even the sweeping initiative, but the reminder that the rivalry between these two men still lived on, shaping the present as much as it had shaped the past. Trump's laughter had echoed far beyond the room in which it was first heard, reverberating across a nation still struggling to decide what kind of story it wanted to tell about itself. And in that echo, America saw itself divided, passionate, and forever captivated by the clash between two legacies.